Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I'm glad that you could join us here today for our Wednesday webinar. Today, we're going to talk about eating for sleep. Uh, my name is Heidi Roth. I'm a registered dietitian, and I'm so glad you're here. I do have the chat box opened, so we do have a short time together, but feel free to put all your questions into the chat. I'll also leave about 5 minutes at the end for some questions as well. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. All right, how is everyone sleeping right now? Hopefully you're sleeping well and you're just here for a couple more tips. But many times, especially as we get older, we don't tend to sleep as well. The good news is that there's a lot of things that we can do to help us sleep well. I'm seeing in the comment section, it varies, right? And it totally does. Sometimes we might sleep well for a week or a month, and then all of a sudden, for some unknown reason, we're no longer sleeping well. But we're going to talk about some things that can help us. We'll talk about sleep hygiene and some of the best foods that we can eat for sleep. But we're going to start off by just talking a little bit about sleep, the sleep architecture, our weight, and our health. Now, it used to be go back 20 or 30 years, people would say, I'll sleep when I'm dead, right? Maybe you've heard people say that. Or it was kind of this badge of honor to not sleep very much. Well, our thinking has very much changed on this. It's changed so much because of all the research showing that good health and sleep are very much linked together. In fact, so much so that the US Army has now promoted sleeping and napping wherever you can, right? Here I have a picture here of this soldier napping, and it used to be, you didn't nap if it was, if you're on duty and it was nighttime. But apparently, now many times the Army says, "Hey, if you get a chance to nap, nap," because, especially if you're on a mission and you might be up for a while, sleep is so important for reaction time, for making good decisions, and for overall health. So, as we talk about sleep, what does sleep look like? So, these are some sleep stages throughout the night. And this is kind of the architecture of, the standard type of sleep. If you don't look like this, don't worry. But this is kind of what we're looking for, kind of in typical sleep architecture. When we talk about architecture, right, it looks like little buildings, and that's, I guess, why they talk about architecture. But basically, we start off during the night and we're awake, and we quickly fall asleep into stage one sleep. And this stage, we don't even realize is happening sometimes. Sometimes it just feels, like we don't even realize we're asleep. And then we go down into stage three. Stage three is that deep restorative sleep. And as you can see, that sleep happens at the beginning of the night. So, where everybody wants to get into deep sleep because that's when a lot of the magic happens with sleep, typically most of that is at the beginning half of the night. And then you can see in the second half of the night is the REM sleep. And during this time, of course, we dream. And that's why, you tend to remember your dreams as you wake up. And if you wake up at 2 in the morning, a lot of times you don't feel like you've dreamt at all because you probably haven't. Dreaming happens more in the second part of the night. Now, our sleep is highly, highly regulated by our circadian rhythm. And circadian rhythm is our body clock, and it comes from circa, meaning around, and dia, mean the day. So the time that we go around the sun, this 24-hour clock. We all set our clocks to the sun. Um, Everything on Earth depends on the sun. Even microscopic organisms apparently set their circadian clocks to the sun. So things like light, darkness, time, different schedules, all determine when we want to sleep. This is also helped along by a hormone, melatonin. And melatonin is produced in the pineal gland of our brain, and it induces drowsiness. It's very sensitive to light. Melatonin also acts as a antioxidant, interestingly enough. And it's also linked to the production of brown fat. Now, we don't always want extra fat, but brown fat is actually a good type of fat because it's a very metabolically active type of fat and it actually burns a lot of calories. Okay. So part of circadian rhythm too are, what makes us sleepy at night? And there's a German word for it, Zeitgebers, which means time giver. And so all the things like light and dark, when we exercise, when we eat, social cues, all of these things contribute to us being tired when we go to bed at night and us waking up in the morning and feeling rested and refreshed. What are the disruptors to our circadian rhythm? Things like shift work. We are very appreciative of our doctors and nurses and EMTs and police and firemen who all work during the night, security guards. But that shift work can take a toll on your health. Um, Other things that can disrupt our sleep are having a lot of bright light at night, being on our phone late at night, not good for our sleep. That 24/7 lifestyle where we're constantly having these lights on and constantly, on our phones and computers, having a large meal late, all of these things are kind of disruptive to our circadian rhythm. Now, there's a lot of hormones involved in sleep as well. Um, but some of the hormones that can be disrupted by poor sleep are two hormones called ghrelin and leptin. I don't know if anyone has heard of these hormones before, but ghrelin is a hormone that makes you hungry. Think of it as your stomach growling. So that's ghrelin. And then leptin is the hormone that kind of tells you like, oh, I feel good. I've had enough to eat. So when we're not sleeping enough, we get an increase in the hormone that makes us want to eat more and a decrease in the hormone that controls our appetite. So one more reason to really focus on sleep. Now, another thing that can disrupt our sleep is our blood sugar levels. Our blood sugar levels rise and fall throughout the various sleep stages. And when we don't sleep enough, we can actually become pre-diabetic. There was a very interesting study that always gets kind of referenced. And in this study, they took healthy young college men and they only allowed them to sleep for 4 hours a night for 6 nights in a row. And then they tested their insulin levels and their blood sugar levels before and after the 6 nights. And they found that after 6 nights of only sleeping 4 hours a night, their blood sugar levels matched those seen in people who were developing diabetes. So, not good. This is in healthy young men. And we know that even just as we get older, our blood sugar levels don't tend to be as good. So, that effect is compounded the older we get. Also, another study, women who slept 7 hours a night were more likely to develop diabetes over time than those who slept between 7 and 8 hours a night. Excuse me, those who slept less than 7 hours a night. So we also know that that correlates to weight. And here you can see on this graph, they followed people over 16 years, and they found that those that were sleeping 5 hours a night or less, that they started off weighing the most in this study. And then as time progressed, they also gained the most weight over time. And it was the same for, the people that did the best were the circles and triangles here at 7 to 8 hours. Interestingly enough, sleeping 9 hours actually was almost equal to sleeping 6 hours a night. So we know that poor sleep is a recipe for potentially weight gain, for poor health, increased diabetes, increased heart risk, um, for higher amounts of stress and pain and potentially social isolation, decreased longevity. Oh my goodness, Heidi, right? You're um, you're making me anxious and I'm not going to sleep very well. So let's take a deep breath. Um, Sleep is one of those things. It's not like exercise. It's not like one of those things that we can say, I'm going to exercise 30 minutes a day and gosh, we do it. We can't always say, I'm going to sleep 8 hours a day, and there we go and do it. We don't have as much control over sleep. But we do have control over our sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene is all those things that we do to get a good night's sleep. And so instead of stressing and worrying, oh my goodness, I'm not getting enough, and what can I do about it? We can focus on, I'm going to do all the different steps that I can. I'm going to focus on when I'm going to bed. I'm going to focus on the foods that I'm eating. So let's talk a little bit more about these. In case we've had anybody else join us in the meantime, I just wanted to remind everyone that feel free to use the chat, and we'll leave a couple minutes at the end for questions as well. Okay, so sleep hygiene, as I mentioned, is all the things that we're going to do to help us to get a good night's sleep. And believe it or not, it starts first thing in the morning. It starts with getting some sunlight first thing in the morning. And going back to that circadian rhythm, that site guy, my German is a little rusty, the time givers, right? That natural light that we get first thing in the morning helps to set all the levels of cortisol and melatonin. Cortisol is a hormone that we secrete first thing in the morning. And you might say, well, cortisol is a stress hormone. Yep, you're right. That stress hormone that we secrete first thing in the morning gets us up out of bed. If we didn't have cortisol, we just might want to like cuddle under the blankets all day long. And then our cortisol levels go down, and then throughout, as we get towards the evening, melatonin levels go up and make us a little bit more tired. That morning light also increases our leptin levels. Leptin helps to control our appetite, and it decreases ghrelin, right? Remember growling stomach, hungry, right? So that's a good thing. So first thing in the morning, open the blinds, let the daylight in. Even on a day where it's cloudy outside, it doesn't have to be sunny, but just getting outside, you're going to be getting so much more light than you are if you are inside of your house. So not only opening the blinds, but also ideally getting outside first thing in the morning for a walk is one of the best things that you can do, and spending time outside wherever possible. The next thing is routine. And just like toddlers have their bedtime every night, and we know for any of those who have had kids, having a schedule really helps them. But it's the same thing for us as adults. And there's more and more research suggesting that based on our circadian rhythms, having the same routine every night is really, really important. And ideally, we would be going to bed at the same time every night, and not fluctuating from by that for more than half an hour. So, if your bedtime is 10:30 at night, some nights maybe it's 10, some nights it's 11, but that's it in terms of variation. Um, and it kind of makes sense. Our body very much, based on our circadian rhythm, needs to know, when am I going to secrete all these hormones to help you be tired at night? Because our body gets very confused if one night we're going to bed at 9 o'clock. Oh, okay, we're going to bed at 9. Let's have lots of melatonin at 9. And then the next night it's 11. And then after that it's 1 a.m. And then we try to catch up on our sleep, and it's 9 p.m. So our body kind of throws up its hands and says, well, who knows what time we're going to bed? Who knows what time we should have these hormones ready, right? So that's where having that schedule is really important. Another thing that can be really important for getting a good night's sleep is exercise. It helps people fall asleep faster, and it improves that quality of sleep. Going back to that sleep architecture, right? Having better sleep architecture, better quality sleep. Um, Now, the other things that also can be helpful are very dark room. Um, Even the slightest amount of light can interfere a little bit with our sleep. I have, I'm a little bit crazy about it. I've got my blackout shades, and I have finally just given up on eliminating all the light in our room. And I sleep with a sleep mask, and I find that, wow, that really makes a difference. cool room, ideally 65 degrees. And that's actually part of the one of the ways that our body knows it's time to sleep is that our body temperature drops. Okay, so what can we do to help us eat better for sleep? Well, probably you all maybe have a vague idea of some of the things that I'm going to talk about. So let's talk about what do the studies say? Well, going back to our circadian rhythm, um, it's best to eat when our body is active and it's light outside. So just like consistent bedtimes are the best, consistency is actually best for regular meal times as well. Our body secretes a lot of different neurotransmitters and hormones and enzymes to help us digest our food. And if we can somewhat have some regular eating patterns, it's best for digestion, but actually better for sleep as well. And so, a lot of the researchers that do research into circadian rhythms really recommend that we not eat for 3 hours before bed. So, sleep is really a time for rest. It's a time for us to rest, for our gut to rest, and our gut microbes to rest as well. So, if we're eating this big meal right before we go to bed, not only are we potentially setting ourselves up for maybe a little bit of, reflux and maybe some indigestion and not sleeping well because of that, but also just it's not as good for our sleep. So consider some time restricted eating, meaning that maybe you stop eating at 8 o'clock at night and then you don't start eating again maybe until 8 or 9 the next morning, that you're shortening your eating window. And ideally, your eating window would be shorter at night, not necessarily in the morning. In the morning, we've got better insulin. We're more insulin sensitive. And there's a lot of studies that suggest that it's really better to eat the bulk of our calories in the morning. Now, socially, what most of us do is we are eating most of our calories maybe after 5 p.m. And the studies show that you don't, just in terms of metabolic health, eating 50% of your calories after 5 p.m. is really not recommended. We want the bulk of the calories to be, earlier in the day and not closer to, not closer to bedtime. Now, another thing that the studies show in terms of sleeping well is watching our intake of these ultra-processed foods. This was an interesting study done in France. It's a huge ongoing study in France, almost 39,000 participants. That's a huge study. Now, this was an observational study, so they did, you know, do a questionnaire for how people were sleeping. They did also do, an ongoing questionnaire of what people were eating. And the key takeaway from this study was that um, ultra processed foods were significantly associated with higher risk of chronic insomnia, regardless of your lifestyle and mental health quality. So the more ultra processed foods people were eating in the study, the more it correlated, you know, with a higher risk of insomnia. So what are these ultra processed foods, right? These are this, to some extent, the standard American diet. Believe it or not, about 60% of our calories come from these types of foods. These types of foods are ubiquitous. They are designed to be tasty. They're designed to be somewhat, for lack of a better word, addictive. And they're, many times cheap and easy. However, study after study keeps kind of coming back and saying, you know what, these types of foods are damaging to our health in several different ways. They can increase our blood sugar levels and send us on that blood sugar roller coaster, right? Where our blood sugar levels spike up and then they come crashing down. How does everyone feel when your blood sugar levels come crashing down? I don't know about you, but I feel shaky, hangry, anxious, just doesn't feel well. These types of foods are also correlated with a disrupted gut microbiome. So all of those microbes in our gut are disrupted by these types of foods as well. So here we go. Here's, these ultra processed foods send us on this blood sugar roller coaster. What happens when our blood sugar levels drop? We release cortisol. Cortisol is that stress hormone that helps to increase our blood sugar levels. And then we secrete insulin and it comes back and we up and down, up and down. This blood sugar roller coaster is not good for our health for many reasons. But ideally, we would get a little bit more of this wave right here where we're a little bit, not having these spikes and drops. Um, but what happens when our blood sugar level drops at night? We release cortisol. Cortisol is that stress hormone that helps to wake us up. So the better we can manage our blood sugar levels during the day, the better we're going to sleep at night because we don't want that blood sugar roller coaster to be continuing all night long as well, and then potentially waking us up. So that's one thing to consider as well. Our gut microbes in sleep. A lot of interesting studies showing that sleep deprivation can cause a shift in our gut microbiome. Less sleep equals less diversity in our gut microbes. And some studies suggest that less diversity in our gut microbes and what's called dysbiosis, right? Not having the right kind of mixture of microbes in our gut are also correlated with insomnia. And it's kind of one of these chicken or the egg type of situations that researchers are trying to figure out. Does less sleep, lead to poor gut health and poor gut microbes, or do poor gut microbes lead to poor sleep? Um, and most likely, it's a little bit of maybe a vicious circle where we're not quite sure where it starts and where it ends, but they both are, it's kind of a bi-directional type of effect. We also know that increased inflammation is linked with some gut microbes that are also linked with insomnia. And what type of diet causes the inflammation? This type of diet is linked, highly, highly linked with being pro-inflammatory. So also not good. A literature review of 20 different diets and excuse me, 20 different studies basically came to the same conclusion that diets high in fiber and healthy fats were associated with better sleep quality, that diets high in protein had better quality, possibly because people had better blood sugar levels and weren't on that blood sugar roller coaster. We know that protein and high fiber and healthy fats can satiate it and can help to stabilize our blood sugar levels a little bit compared to eating high amounts of simple carbohydrates. Right? Go back to that slide that we had before. Those are all simple carbohydrates, high in sugar, high in starch, high in flour, and those were all correlated with poor sleep. Some other studies suggested that foods containing tryptophan, melatonin, and phytonutrients, lots of antioxidants, also were linked to improved sleep outcomes. So, no surprise, the Mediterranean style diet, high in fruits and vegetables and beans and nuts and seeds and legumes and omega-3 fatty acids in the fish. And all of these things can contribute to health in so many different ways, but then are also correlated with better sleep. Okay. So I'm seeing a source. What are the vegan sources of tryptophan? And here we go. Things like squash and pumpkin seeds contain 58% of the recommended intake of tryptophan. So things like tofu, 212% of the recommended daily intake. Soybeans, oatmeal, also a good source of tryptophan. And then, of course, there's the things that we maybe typically would associate with higher tryptophan, right? The lean chicken and turkey, the pork, the beef, the fish, milk and eggs. But there are certainly plenty of vegan sources of protein that will also contain decent amounts of tryptophan. Believe it or not, foods also contain melatonin. And tart cherry juice has been highly correlated with better sleep and tart sour cherries. And part of that is because it contains so much melatonin. Walnuts contain a little bit of melatonin, not nearly the same amount of tart cherries for sure, but things like rice, peanuts, tomatoes, and bananas all contain a little bit of melatonin. Um, glycine. Glycine is an amino acid that is a non-essential amino acid, meaning that we don't absolutely have to have it. However, um, studies have shown that having glycine closer to bedtime is involved in some brain chemistry and also helps to decrease our core body temperature. Potentially helps to contribute to quality sleep, and some studies also suggest that it decreases daytime sleepiness as well. So maybe having a little bit of bone broth before bed. Glycine is one of those things that you do find a lot in collagen. Collagen's only found in animals, and that's why things like bone broth and gelatin are so high in glycine. But you also do find it certainly in some vegan sources as well. Things like sunflower seeds are also an excellent source of glycine. Not like the bone broth, but will contain some glycine as well. So those are all some things to think about adding in addition. Um, Other sleep aids, things like lavender, vanilla, jasmine, are scents that are associated with sleeping better. Having a little bit of hot tea, chamomile, valerian, passion flower. I drink, a sleepy time tea. There's also another tea that's like a stress relief tea, and that's really nice before bed. But I, you know, be smart about it. Don't have a huge cup of tea and then go straight to bed. You're going to have to get up to go to the bathroom. So have this, maybe 2 hours before bed. Um, Really with melatonin, the recommendations are mixed with melatonin, and um, really ideally you should start with the smallest amount possible, even perhaps half a milligram. And it's really, really discouraged taking large amounts of melatonin on a regular basis. One thing, a mineral correlated with better sleep too is magnesium. And there's a form of magnesium called magnesium glycinate that actually is, so it's magnesium that's bound to glycine, so also correlated with some better sleep um, in many people. So just to kind of wrap everything up, what are the 10 sleep commandments? Keep a regular schedule, exercise regularly, get light during the day, avoid it at night, keep your bedroom cool, dark, and comfortable. Don't eat 3 hours before bedtime. Don't drink excessive liquids, especially alcohol before bed. Alcohol will help you fall asleep. And however, it's going to disrupt that sleep architecture and lead to poor quality sleep. No caffeine after 12 noon. If you can, don't go to bed angry or worried or upset. So, one more reason to kind of get off of social media, get off your phone before bed, because many times that can cause some, perhaps us to be upset a little bit. You can nap during the day, but make sure that you don't nap too long or too late during the day, and supplement wisely if you need it with things like magnesium, and maybe take, some bone broth. And that's it. We're just about out of time. So, thank you all so much for joining us here today. And just wanted to see if anybody had any other questions. Thank you for the also the questions that you did send. It's always nice to have that as well.